Cool. So we have Thomas here, who is going to talk about a bit of the Hugging Face story and the early days. And we're going to talk about a couple of the topics, and then we're going to try to leave as much Q&A time as possible. So Thomas has one of the most unconventional background I think I've seen in a startup founder in AI. So I think we have to get started and talk about that. Maybe you can talk about the how did you get to building an AI company, and what schooling, and what type of work did you do after school, and how did you guys meet together?
Yeah, I'm a late founder. Like, I started quite late. Before that, I did many things trying to find what I wanted to do, or maybe I'm just interested in too many things. So I studied as an engineer, and then I did a PhD in physics. Was working on quantum physics, but more like applied superconducting materials, cold temperature, like this kind of quantum computer type of things. And I think it's still not fully ready, to be honest. So I'm a bit more, I'm still a bit cold on quantum computing. So I was doing that PhD, I did a bit of postdoc, and then I was like, okay, should I go in academia? I was not fully sure. And so I ended up in an early life crisis, and I became a lawyer. So I had I was like, okay, I want to keep understanding how the world works. I start to understand the physics part. Let's understand like the human part. I was like, law is what controls the world. So I joined a patent firm, patent attorney. I became patent attorney. I got law degree in the evening. I did that for 6 years. It was really cool, actually. I had a lot of startups that were trying to understand, okay, how can we protect our idea? A lot of hardware startups and larger teams, and actually that's how I discovered deep learning. Because some of my startups at the end were starting to do the early deep learning stuff.
What year was this? What year?
So that was 2014. So that's really the beginning, 2014, 15. So only vision was really working at that time, and people like text is not interesting at all. Why would you want to do text? And you had like basically ImageNet, things like that. So one of the startups I really liked back in the day. I think now it's really long time ago. So they were like scanning image of field and trying to see weed and spray, like how you call this, like weed killer just on specific things. So basically using vision to optimize a lot of things. And so I started to dive in this, and then I started to read the early, for those who remember, the deep learning book by Jan Goodfellow. It's like very, very long time ago now. And this was like physics. I was like, oh, that's cool. It's like physics, but you can do experiments in a few days instead of like 2 years buying your cryostat, building it and everything. So I was like, that's really nice. And at that time, I also needed to move to the US. I guess some of you also had this maybe. So anyway, I wanted to move, and so my old friend from uni was starting Hugging Face. He was like, "Oh, you can join. You'll have a job at the beginning with us, and then if you want, you can do something more serious like law stuff." And ended up, Hugging Face ended up being bigger than we expected. So I'm still there.
And what was the original idea of Hugging Face? Why is it called Hugging Face?
Yeah, so back in the day, there was a game. So we wanted to do kind of a talking Tamagotchi. So like, this little animal that you could interact with. And we thought, okay, with deep learning, you can maybe send like selfie or picture, and it can answer funny thing about what you're looking at. So we had this whole idea, and I would say the vision part was working, sort of, if you filled in the 10,000 classes of ImageNet. So that was really, so some of them are really weird. So you have all the list of birds, but you don't really use that a lot, and then some things are missing. But it still kind of worked, but the text part was not working at all. Like generating fun text. I mean, even today, when you ask a joke to ChatGPT, still like that could be better. But at that time, it was really not working at all. So we had, even in-house, we had a comedian who was just writing dialogue for the app, or templates of dialogue, because the RNN back was the LSTM was just so shitty.
So like Tamagotchi, friends, AI friends, AI gaming. This is kind of like a normal pitch nowadays in 2026. This was 2016.
Yeah.
How did people react when you told them you're going to work on that?
yeah, it was quite hard to pitch. I mean, that's one thing. So we tried, for instance, we also tried to, I mean, the only place we could really raise for that was in the US. We tried to raise in other places, so in France, and see nobody was buying this. In the US, even in the US, like a lot of people were like, And also at that time, chatbot had kind of a bad reputation because people have kind of overpromised what they could do, but they didn't really deliver. So we had this kind of issue, like people were like, that's a chatbot. So no, it was, yeah, pretty tough. The nice thing was like you had all these social app and the community app that were growing quite big. So we were kind of pitching this type of thing, like we're going to build a huge community around the game. People will really love spending time on it. There was also the time, like the main metrics was how much time you want to spend on this thing. So this was quite resonating quite well. So when we wanted to pivot to open source, we could keep a part of our pitch, which was we're going to build a huge community around the thing. And so the thing moved from being a game to being a open source library, but kind of was smoother transition than it could have been, right? Because sometimes the problem when you pivot is like your early investor are like, we're a cybersecurity company, and now you do, I don't know, community games. Like we don't really know if we want to follow you there.
You guys were in France?
So that time, no, we were in New York. So we started in an incubator in New York called BetaWorks. So I was always in Europe at that time because I ended up not moving to the US, but my two co-founders were in New York. We raised, a couple of angel and then SV angel, or like not really directly SV, but A Capital, who is the son of Ron, and that was our first batch of investor. Yeah.
Can you talk? I think it's always interesting to look back and like, you always hear about like crazy variations, but usually a lot of the companies that started, 10, 15 years ago. Usually they start at much lower variations than you would expect.
Yeah.
Can you? I don't know if you've shared any of these numbers.
Oh yeah, they're all online. But yeah, we had a much like more steady growth than the crazy thing that you see right now, right? So we raised like 500K, and then couple million for the first, and then 15 million for Series A. So it was really like a comparison to now is really nice. I still think it's really nice in a way because you kind of de-risk and you raise kind of progressively with how your company is actually, rather than raising on where you think your company is going to be in 6 years, which I think is a bit of gamble. So I'm a little bit old-fashioned, I think, in this thing.
And it seems like open source was like a key. A key part of the company in like early, like even before like the Hugging Face of today, and then you have in robotics now, like everything y'all are all in on open source. Can you talk a bit more about like why are you?
So we were at this stage. We had this product that was growing a bit, but like a lot of like ugly growth hack, and trying to get it off the ground. And we had also this problem of like credibility when we wanted to raise or work with people. People like, okay, you don't really do AI anyway. You're not like you don't have any credential from DeepMind or PhD or whatever from here. And chatbots also, people who do chatbots, they just write if then else. That's what people thought, which was really true actually for us. We just have a bunch of if then else indeed. And so like, okay, we need to do something. So we're gonna. That's something I studied on the side. I said, okay, we're going to publish some papers, and also we can release some code. And so we did this, and the code we released actually got like a huge traction. It's crazy over 1 month.
When you say like huge traction, what was it back then? Because the AI community was much smaller than
yeah. So that was way smaller than now. Not cloud buzz, right? Like 35K in 1 week or something like that. But that was like still quite significant, and quickly like all the AI researcher, which was the only AI community at that time, so that was very academic, mostly academia, plus Google. Everyone started to use our code, like basically to quickly like use this. For instance, there was this big model called BERT from Google, and everyone wanted to use BERT, used our code. And at that time, there was everyone working on NLP. But that was way smaller in terms of community. But
and so at the time, big. Did you already like shelf the consumer app, or was this like
no?
A kind of
so
like
we kept both for 1 year. So I was mostly alone growing the open source stuff, and then the rest of the team. It was small. We were like 7, I think. The rest was working on the app, and then after 1 year, we kind of were like, okay, it's probably time to raise, our Series A or something. And so we had on one end, we had this like exponential growth of issues, stars, whatever we measure, like the GitHub thing, and then the very much more linear like time, like retention rates was still like really tricky. And so at this time we were like, okay, maybe we should just shelve the app and we raise on this open source pitch.
And how was that conversation to do like a measure pivot basically?
I mean, internally,
did it feel easy or?
Internally, that was pretty easy because just everyone, I mean, you're kind of looking for exponential thing everywhere, right? In the early days, you're like, okay, where do we get traction? Where do we? So it was quite obvious there was some kind of traction there. I think what was a little bit tricky was coming back to the first investors and starting to prepare the fundraise and say, okay, are you going to be supportive of this new thing? The nice thing is A Capital, I mean, like SV Angel, they have invested in so many different things that they are quite okay with many type of thing. And then pitching the open source thing was still a bit tricky, of course. But yeah, we got couple, we got Lux, very excited in New York as well.
It was late 2018.
Yeah, this was 2019, the summer. Okay. 2019.
So you had work on the consumer app for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And what was the team during these 2 years? Like,
it was like between 4, slowly growing to 8. So small team, mostly in person in New York, apart from me, who was, and then very engineering focused. Yeah.
And at what time did you think that, like, what is the one event where you felt like you had like some type of real product market fit? If you can pinpoint to one thing where you kind of like made you pause and were like, oh shit. Is it like the number of downloads? Is it like the feedback you got from the researchers?
I think we really lived and grew through social media. So like viral tweets, viral LinkedIn stuff.
And was it like you posting it or other people posting it?
That was me. Yeah, first thing, and then a couple of them, because you can also have one random viral thing. You should not think it directly product market fit, but when you start to have like 2 or 3, strong traction on a couple of successive releases of your library, I think that's a sign there is something here. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You've made a lot of bets in robotics now, and out of and especially open source robotics. Can you talk a bit about like why and you acquired a company also or multiple companies?
Yeah, I mean there's several things. So for a few years between 2019 and like the following 4 or 5 years, I was always really worried we might die. I felt very fragile, like everything we were building felt very fragile. So I just keep trying to find new thing we should do.
Maybe talk about the worries in your head, because in the moment, it's very easy to think like, oh, if Google releases this, they're going to kill us. Like, can you talk about some of the worries in your head?
Just more generally, because the field is moving so quickly, I'm always like, okay, if we stop now, I've seen so many startups that were kind of competing with us that became, kind of irrelevant maybe in a way, or disappeared just because they're like, okay, this is our product, we're going to stay with this now. Maybe that's personal, but I'm always like, okay, we need to have more product, we need to have something else, we need to follow the field. And so after models, I was like, okay, we start to have a nice model thing, but I was like, data sets are super key and we are not there. And if models is in the end not big, maybe data is going to be the big thing. So the second big library I focused on was this library called data sets. And I thought, okay, there is something we can build around this. So that was the second thing. And then I became very worried about the state of open source itself. So when GPT-3 was released, and they were like, okay, we are not going to release this one open, and like people started to be like with this mindset, and then all the new startup at this time, so it was Cohere, AI21, a bunch of startups were really like, we're not going to release anything. And I was like, oh no, like the source of open source model is like. And so I started to work a lot on trying to push open source. So we did a very large like open source project called Bloom. It's very old now. It's like 5 years old. But basically trying to bring everyone and try to motivate them. And that kind of had some impact because some of this team were also at Meta, and that managed to help them convince Meta starting open sourcing, and for a long time Meta was then kind of carrying the open source flame, I would say. And so for a few years I was really focused on that. Let's see how we can push these big labs to open source more, or how we can find way to generate more models. And more recently, I would say there's a couple of things around robots, which is, I started to see a little bit the same pattern, which is a lot of people making robotic company like Figure, Tesla, really cool. None of them thinking that open source is anything interesting. Like all of them looking like very vertical, siloed thing. You're going to buy the robots. You're not allowed to touch it, to understand how it's working in it. There won't be, I don't expect us to have any API to tweak the Tesla Optimus or the Figure one. And so I was like, okay, we also need open source robots. I think just generally, I think there's a balance. Like, it's nice to have closed source. It's really cool. I'm happy to have an iPhone, a thing. But I also like to have this alternative. If I want to tweak something, I know I can hack on my Linux thing. And if I want to do something crazy, I know I can still like do it on Android, or like I can explore this crazy idea, right? And all this closed source ecosystem is very hard to explore crazy idea. So that's a bit the general view of the world. I think open source is super important as a yin to the yang of closed source, and so robotics was something like that. Plus, I think robots are really cool. So it's also that at some point I was like with my co-founder, I was like, I really want to just make robots. So let's find a way to make this make sense.
We agree. Robots are cool. Is your job nowadays kind of like basically thinking of like future?
Yeah.
Thinking and knocking on the US labs and telling them like, hey, knock knock, can you open source your stuff?
Yeah, mostly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And
I mean, the knock knock is not super successful most of the time, but still try. Yeah. It worked quite well with OpenAI in the end. They were like, okay.
And I guess with the last question, like how, when you talk to the US or European labs and the Chinese labs, what is the difference?
Oh, they're very different, all of them. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to summarize. I would say the Chinese lab are really strong on open source, but that's kind of core. I think it's really going to be here to stay. They are very competitive, and in a way, they compete on open source, like the most open source. That's always very surprising to me. But yeah, I have a theory that in the end, they don't care that much about margin. In the end, just like there's a lot of things in the electric stack in the electric stack in China that actually almost are zero margin, like solar panel, thing like that, very close. And I think LLM is a bit the same. But yeah, so they're very pro open source. I mean, the European labs, there's not so many of them, right? There's Mistral, and there's a couple of new, but that's hopefully there will be more of them. So mostly I'm trying to convince them to be more ambitious. And the US lab, I think there is a nice set of new labs. I'm very optimistic about things like reflection.
So there's a pipeline of like open source.
Yeah, I think it's going to come back to the US now. Like I feel like there is a strong understanding that it's not normal that all the base model come from China. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
We're just going to open it to the two questions.
Hi, Thomas. Thank you very much for being here. It's a great opportunity to have you. My name is Dudu. I'm the CEO and co-founder of One9. So it's a multilingual and multimodal data infrastructure enabling AI labs, research teams, and universities to build advancing LLMs. Advancing LLMs, computer vision, and actually speech recognition, but we are very focused on mid and low resource languages. So today's AI understands 100 out of 7,000 languages, leaving 4 billion behind. So our goal is to build the data infrastructure that actually... Yeah, okay, sure. I'll go ahead because it's going to be long. So Thomas, if you would be starting Hugging Face today, would you be more data-centric or model-centric? And another thing is, to achieve that do you believe in like multi-modal or multilingual data AI? And since like data quality is really important, do you think like moving towards like more commercial and licensed data would like improve the data quality? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be short so we can take more questions. But yeah, I would say data is always super interesting, very hard to get mindshare, visibility, virality around that. So the way we do that at Hugging Face is we have this thing, we know people will get excited about it, the models usually where people will get excited about this. And then we try to bundle things that we think are important like data. So that's what we do. For you in particular, I would really try to focus on something, I know, for instance, where you feel like there is a strong need, like let's say audio data in low research language, that is very hard, and if you can solve this, you can sell it to too many labs, and probably other things, but at least I know a couple of startups there. I think it makes sense. So I would be super pragmatic there, and then it depends a bit, yeah. Like, I think there's many ways to build a company here. It can be very B2B, where you don't need so much mindshare, and you will just like find the right clients, and that's just really you should be a good salesman, go do that, basically. That's, I think, one thing. Or you can do like more like a B2C, where you try to really get a lot of more visibility and try to grow maybe in this like a medium range of company size. And here you need to find the thing that will make some virality or will make you actually visible to because you cannot go one by one to all of these companies, right? So I either target the big ones and you kind of do a consulting thing. So yeah, I think it can pull a bit off. I think it's tricky. Yeah. So good luck.
Hi, Thomas. My name is Grace. Thank you for sharing your story of building Hugging Face. I'm founder of World Intelligence, building data infrastructure for physical AI. And in the short term, we're focusing on egocentric data. We custom build those classes. And there are a lot of open source data sets on the market right now, like Build AI, everything. But we don't see like multimodal, high quality data sets open source right now. And for us, we have customers that are willing to buy those data. But do you think it's a good idea to keep open sourcing more data? We have some data sets on Hugging Face right now, open source. Do you think we should open source more?
I think so. I might be a bit biased on this, but yeah. No, I think so, and I think you can have a play where you open source part of it, and I think the high quality data play in robotics is a good one. But I mean, some people have other opinions, so I know it's very my own opinion, but I feel like there's a play there. And you can always open source a bit, like, that's what works. Like even in the LLM, like I don't know, like there's a lot of data sets, people buy them for 10 million or thing, and you just supply a couple of samples of high quality things, and then you make them actually buy the rest. It works really well, yeah.
Okay, yeah. What if we open source like large scale data sets, but then if they want to use it for commercial uses, we like charge like licensing fees?
Yeah, I think you can. Yeah, it is. Yeah, and plus I feel like if you have the data collection, I mean, the teams will always need more specific data in their own thing. So I feel like it's really hard to imagine that someone will open source something covering every use case, and we all know this model don't generalize anyway, so they will need you anyway. So I feel like sometimes people are very scared to open source something, but it's rarely as dramatic as you think to your business. And on the other hand, like all the visibility, like Build AI is a good example. Like all the visibility they grabbed from it was really huge, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey. So my question is regarding computer use models. So right now, all the big labs are building top-down approaches. So they use vision. They're relying on vision to kind of click through like a human would. Across a computer. But do you see that in the future, Microsoft or Apple will take a bottom-up approach instead of relying on vision and trying to use the computer like a human, which is, I think, inefficient? There are faster ways to do that and automate internally. So computer use models would maybe phase out in the future because there's also not enough data for computer use models. There's not enough recordings of people using the computer in like a high quality data set.
Not so much. I would not really bet on that. I think the simple general thing, you can record a lot of data, just screen capture, all of that. So I feel like this is really scalable. it's way more independent of the background, the under thing. You have a good example recently. You had this Copilot for Excel, right? And then Cloud Excel, and they took this very different approach. Copilot for Excel, they use the internals. They know a lot about what's happening behind the scene, and then actually Cloud Excel that only really took this very high level view of things seems to work quite better. So yeah, I feel like it's but that's same. That's just a bet. I might be wrong, but I feel like I'm more bullish on this very unified,
Vision
simple,
based?
vision based actually. Yeah. I even have some friends who are doing startup. They just actually even just film what's happening on an iPhone, something. So they bypass all the complex thing on how to integrate with the software thing, and they don't care about that. I think if you can nail this, it's actually way more powerful. Yeah.
Just a quick question. There aren't a lot of computer use companies coming up. I mean, now a lot of them are coming up. I mean, private computer use. There's a few startups I've seen come up.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think data is very valuable to them? Since you said it's easy to gather this computer use data. Do you think
probably. It's always better, I think, still if you can make your business plan a bit more than just selling data. Selling data, it's always people tend to lowball the price, and it's really and if you can tie this to a business thing, let's say, I don't know, you're recording stuff and say, hey, we can help you with your downstream business with this and this. I think it's always better if you can think about something like that tie this to the revenue of someone making a lot of revenue. Yeah. So it depends your vertical, basically. Yeah.
Hey, Thomas. I'm Rahul. I'm the founder of Browser. I think it's a great segue. We're also building computer use agents. I think you described our product better than I could towards the end of your explanation. So we're building a one-click automation system where instead of letting AI get creative and imaginative, we're actually asking people to record their workflows once within our own native browser so that we get context about the process itself, and then we automate those processes for businesses. So that's basically what we're building. So my question, though, is more aligned towards something that you mentioned, which was about your growth, right? In the beginning, you mentioned that the growth for Hugging Face was more steady, right? But generally in venture, it looks like everyone is expecting a hockey stick growth. And I think more so right now with the whole AI buzz and stuff. So I'm just curious, do you think if you built Hugging Face today with that same steady growth, would have you found investors to kind of invest in your product? And what would the strategy be for you to kind of, convince investors?
I mean, that's kind of two different things, to be honest. Also, how your company is doing, how it's growing, and your fundraise, these two different things. So typically, I think that the way we think about fundraise and the way we did it was first try to fundraise a bit early before you're out of cash, because and the more you're desperate, the harder it is, right? So be mindful about that, and try to fundraise when you have a nice story. And so this nice story is about an exponential, but there are many exponential. It can be just, you sign your first contract, you went to 0 to 1. That's a big exponential now. You're on track, and so yesterday you had 0, today you have 1. So tomorrow you're going to have 2, and then 4 and 8. And at the end of the week, you have 30 contracts with this nice slope. So you tell this story. Each time you have something that uptick, you can build kind of a story around that. So we build many stories around our series. And I would say the later stage you are, the more obviously this is grounded on actually long growing exponential thing. But so you don't have to be too worried about that. I think even if you're linear on some of your metrics, maybe on some other, you actually have a nice uptick that you can say. So yeah, at least that's one way you can do that. And the other could also be to really sell, the more the big vision, and then maybe you don't focus too much, in particular in the early stage, you don't focus too much on your pure revenue, for instance, and these are just one of the many signals they will take, right? It's not that they're not going to invest because in your first 3 months, you're just linear growth. That's going to be, yeah.
Got it. Just a follow-up to that. So, for example, right now in the current VC environment, would you say that it's better to kind of, focus on the product itself and the bigger vision, or would it be to kind of set milestones for ourselves, get customer momentum, and then figure out the fundraising process?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're building. So some of the founders I follow, I tell them they need to get traction because that's obviously they're in a field where they need to get traction, and if they don't get traction, there's nothing. And some of them are much more in the thing where the product needs to be built. Like there is some research question, maybe hard tech question. Can we build that? And then it's fine if you don't get commercial traction. Everyone is fine with that. So it really is case by case. I still think I've seen that over and over, but it's a bad idea to, in particular for pure software thing, to just lock yourself in a room for 1 year and just build a thing. I've seen that even with like seasoned people still think they could pull this out. The thing is often you came out on the market and you're out of phase, or like you're just, so if you should still like, even if it's not revenue, but like product fit is still something you should get if you can. Yeah, that's platitude, but I think it's true. Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll do one question per person because we have quite a bit of people that want to ask a question.
Hey, Tomas. My name's Ari. I'm the co-founder of Nexus Robotics. We build remote VR teleoperation software for robotics companies, which is very applicable at the Robot. I'm kind of curious, Hugging Face has kind of set the standard in like many different places, whether that's like with data sets or transformers. How do you think about going about that? And, when you're like kind of setting those standards, what does that look like when you're saying, oh, I want the industry to use this format?
Yeah, so it's hard to force the industry. Like you can want, but most of the time, like people choose, right? So you like, and we also had case where we failed, but I think it's a mix of many things. Finding an area where actually there is a standard that's really missing. But not some. If there is already something, we never try to compete with them. But like the recent one in the robot, okay, there is a lot of standard for data set. That's annoying and like never really worked in the past. And so we're like, okay, we need to tackle that. What you discover usually when you dive is that it's challenging. That's the reason nobody really pulled this out. And then the thing for a standard is it only works if you manage to convince people that it's a standard. And the way you convince them is to make your thing so large that it looks obvious that's going to be the thing. So for instance, in data sets, I mean, we have now, I don't know exactly, 250,000 data sets on the hub. But when it started, the dataset library, I was like, we need to get at least 100 data sets so that it looks serious. And then we were like, okay, now we need to get at least 1,000 so that people think it's the place to find a data set. So you need to have yourself this kind of wide support that you will build alone, because nobody in the beginning really want to help you build your standard outside of your company, because the reality of open source is people only come to help you when you've won, like when you finished it. Basically, they come and they say, "Oh, I'm happy to help you push a little bit here." So, but in the beginning, you need to do all the things. So all the integration, you're thinking, oh, we want to support 100 things. You have to build all of that yourself, and that's usually very boring. It's very repetitive. You're like when we were adding this 100 data set at the beginning, that was really like super annoying to do. But that's a good sign, because if it's boring and annoying, it means like that's the reason nobody did it. And then at the end, you ship your thing. People are like, wow, it supports everything. It should be the new standard. So that's a little bit how we do that, I would say, yeah, in a nutshell.
That makes a ton of sense. Sorry, Good Bear. I have to ask. I have to do it.
You can ask after.
All right.
We're keep going.
All right.
Hey, Thomas Hirosha, building Marketrix. So we are building a simulation engine, like essentially we simulate real users so that we can automate support, right? My question is, right, do you think in your wave, there is sort of like an abstraction layer that's missing right now between the models and then the real world, right? Something like a simulation engine or behavioral engine, right? That's sort of like something that sits between like an operating system and the hardware, right? Do you think something like that is missing right now?
Sorry, I didn't catch the beginning. Which subfield? In which field?
Just like how like an operating system lies between hardware and like applications, right? Do you think there is an abstraction layer that is missing right now between the real world and then the models?
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people want to build, like for instance, operating system for robots. I don't know if it's exactly what you're saying, yeah, but I'm a bit doubtful. But I might be proved wrong on this. But I'm a bit doubtful. I feel like adding an abstraction is only interesting if it's really needed. Like a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to add an abstraction there in this thing, and I'm going to be the company owning the abstraction, and I make a lot of money, which is okay. But you need to think, okay, what are the incentives really of your user to want your abstraction? That's the more important part than I'm going to make a lot of money. That's usually the consequence of having a very useful abstraction. And it's not always needed to add another abstraction. So that's the thing. I'm a bit tough. Like in robotics, for instance, we have ROS, which is very nice. But also everyone complains about ROS. Like nobody really wants ROS. At least it's annoying. And so for instance, in the robot, we're like, okay, we're not going to add like this layer actually. But yeah, it's a case by case. But I think you really need to see what is making this so much better that everyone actually want to have the pain of. One thing I say about open source library is even in one open source library, every abstraction you add is a cost to your user because they have to learn this thing. You add something called token, something called, I don't know, whatever, stars, something. They will have to learn, oh, what is this thing token? Oh, okay, it has this method and this thing. And that's just a... Now that I say that, I realize that now we're in the world of Cloud Code, so maybe it's totally different, actually. I didn't, because nobody bear the burden of learning your abstraction anymore, because Cloud Code just does it. So I would have to update my response on this. What does it mean in the world of Cloud Code? Should we build more like intermediate operating system and abstraction? Because anyway, nobody's gonna learn it, or just Cloud Code we use them? Yeah, let's brainstorm on that. You give me your answer. I don't know what it means.
Right. Thanks, Thomas.
My question for you, so I'm safe, and my question for you is, what, as you are from inside of the AI, how you see the evolution of AI with the LLMs that we speak, that some of them said like they don't have a bright future. We speak about world models, and also what is the evolution of open source?
I mean, I'm optimistic and pessimistic. So I think there's still a lot of very cool stuff to be built right now with the models. I think there is a lot of it's a green field of cool stuff to do, right? It's also quite obvious that they generalize less than we would have hoped so. And actually, the only thing that people are doing right now is just training them on all the data and keep expanding this. So it's kind of, and so for robotics, this has one big consequence, I think, which is that we might have to train these robots on every little action everywhere, and it's going to be really long. At least it will be way bigger than we thought. You know, at some point people thought, oh, we're just going to have 10 trajectory, and then world model will fill all the gaps. I think it's a bit less convincing right now. So that's one thing, but yeah, so it's a mix of the two. And then there's a bunch of new labs right now trying new thing. I think the labs trying, the other thing annoying is that, and kind of related, is that they're very static, so they cannot learn new things afterwards, after you've trained them. I think this is something a lot of people are working on. It's really hard to tackle as a challenge. And also infrastructure, it means it will be quite harder to deploy, just one model for everyone if we want to personalize and if I want to have my... So there's a lot of question there. I think that people will probably explore this year and next year. But in the meantime, you can build cool stuff on top of what's there. Yeah, so.
Merci.
Hey, Thomas. I'm Alex. I'm the CEO of Artificial Brains. And what we want is to build an infrastructure for people and builders to build brain for robots. We are using spiking neural networks to try to solve the problem of continual...
Cool. Yeah, you sent me a message, right?
Yeah. Continual learning. And my question for you is, you start to work in Hugging Face in a moment where nobody else were working in AI, or a very few people, and there are three things that I see that they are important when a new technology comes, and all of this is from the learnings of AI, which is we have the architecture, we have the platform for other people to start to play with it, and we have a big model that brings the wow moment for everyone to believe in that. So what piece of advice would you give me in where to focus my energy? Because I have a platform that I create for myself.
Yeah.
I have early evidence of continual learning with spiking neural networks, but right now I want to like focus my energy 100% in the thing that is gonna bring the big
I mean, this
win.
for these super big tech, deep tech bets, you should really see the early stage as a de-risking phase. So you just list the main risk of why this would not work or why nobody would be interested in this and why it's maybe not. And you try to find the most dangerous thing, like the one you're like, this is probably the one reason this is not going to work at all. And you focus on de-risking this first. Yeah, I think that's really it's hard because you really love your idea, and sometimes you want to ignore this thing, and you want to, this dangerous thing, I'll keep it for later. And now I work on the interesting and easy progress I know, and the dangerous thing, I'll keep them. But you should try to the opposite, which is this dangerous thing, I'm going to tackle it first, or see if I can de-risk or prove that this can work. I don't know what it is about you, but for instance, could be like, what's going to be the advantage of this, and this is one risk. Can I scale this to the size where it would work? This is another risk. Like there's a bunch of this, so try to work on the one that's the scariest.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Because in the end, if it doesn't work, it's better that it stop working right now, you know. And if you're like in 3 months, this was not going to lead anywhere. It's better to stop now than in 10 years. You're like, oh, we made a lot of progress, but in the end, that was not going to work. So, yeah.
Hi, Thomas. Thank you for sharing your story. So I'm Natalie. We are building Playpin, cute pet robots you can put in your pocket. So essentially, the human-robot interaction is like 2026 Tamagotchi with behavior engine, character growth. So some of our team is like super strong advocates of open source. So one angle we've been thinking about is actually open sourcing the device and firmware, and then we handle the back-end data and memory section. So I'm wondering on what are your thoughts and the path to profitability for open source projects in 2026?
Yeah, I'm quite biased because that's how I like to build stuff. But I like the part when you open source something. I feel like you can then you can bring in a community. You can try to have people. It can be pure open source, or it can be an API or finding way for people to plug in your thing. At least I like to build this type of product a lot. So I feel like the nice thing is you can try to generate this ecosystem of companies or people excited about what you build. I don't know if it applies exactly for your robots, but they're going to build things. You know, just like the iPhone is really cool because there is the App Store and everyone is making app, right? If it was something and Apple had to make every app, it would not be a success at all, right? So all this type of thing, I think if you can make them like that, I feel like you can have an unfair advantage at some point where you don't even work anymore on your product. Like Apple could almost stop maybe, and the people will keep making apps and keep pushing the product. So there is a way to make, I think, hardware product as well like this that's very successful. Now, does it work for a little companion? Depend, I guess, on your target, right? If it's only kids, I don't know, you want to maybe have, at least you want to have like safety standard on what kind of connection and integration you can have. And then if you really, so this is more like the API point, and then if we really want to open source, I think open source always has to be very deliberate and part of a strategy. So to say at Hugging Face, for instance, we open source a lot and we build things specifically for open sourcing, but our core business is hosting on our platform, on our website. We don't open source our hosting platform at all, like the Hugging Face website, because there is no reason to open source it, right? Nobody can build really cool stuff apart from exact concurrent or competitor of us. So that's not very interesting for us to open source. And so the thing we open source, there is 3 reasons you want to open source something. I think the first one is you want to build an ecosystem, like I was saying. The second part is you want to just get some visibility, and you think people are going to get excited, and like Cloudbot or whatever, you're going to have like a lot of Twitter, like very viral thing, and just bring mindshare on your company. It's also the same for open sourcing models. A lot of company open source model mostly just for visibility. And the last part is hiring. I think the hiring pipeline is way better when you're an open source company in many cases, in particular in the beginning, because the applicant can either be former contributors or they take a look at what you do and they get excited about the code. So, I mean, if it's nice code, if it's very shitty code, you should be careful. At least clean it and have a nice thing. But yeah, so that's the main three reasons usually you can start to open source. So if it doesn't fall in any of these category, let's say you have a nice side project, you think it's cool, but maybe the committee is going to be like 10, 20 teams, 10, 20 people. This is not going to be interesting, right? If you open source a repository and maintain it and it has like 5 stars, you should probably rather not open sourcing it. So you have to think, yeah, what do you want to take out of it?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Daniel. I'm building AI models for like AI generated content. And my question is, since we're all like early stage founders, for those of us like training our own models, do you have like any tips on like trying to reach state of the art, given that we have like limited compute?
I mean, the usual trick is to start with post-training and the things that are maybe compute light and maybe make your way if you want to more like mid-training, pre-training when you start to have some enough traction or, or like team or thing that you can raise money to pay for that, yeah. Yeah, I think that's the other trick you can find is if you have a secret source of compute, like somewhere. Like there is some. I know in France, for instance, we have a public cluster that's pretty easy to ask compute on, and some teams started on this. Like Mistral, they started on public cluster first. So sometime it happens. In the US, there is quite less of this. But like for instance, in the US, you have for a long time you had this Google TPU, free TPU program that you could actually get some pretty nice discount or like just free GPU. And yeah, so try to, that was me right with this.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Gautam. My question was the true sense of intelligence, what everyone says, is when models are able to do long horizon reasoning and they are able to predict or give some reasoning about the future. Because there is no contamination for such tasks, right?
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think prediction is key element of intelligence overall, in general, I think. Yeah. Yes, sorry, I'm not sure it's exactly, yeah.
Hey, Tomas, I'm Oliver. I'm building Memo, which is a microphone that allows you to speak to people and machines with one button click. I've thought heavily about open sourcing my project, but it really feels like a one-way door. So I'm curious, you touched on it a little bit in response to Natalie's question, but I'm curious if you have like a framework for devising the strategy and thinking about whether or not it's the right move for the company.
Yeah, I think that's the framework I said. Yes, so you see, okay, what do you really expect to get out of it? Very like pragmatically, and then you kind of list the pros and cons. I think people tend to overestimate the cons, like giving, people tend to overthink, for instance, that your competitor will copy. That's the usual thing, right? If they are busy just taking a look and copying your code, they're probably going to lose anyway. So so you don't need to worry too much about that. The same with hitting your business. Like let's say you sell something that's based on your open source. Quite likely the people who are paying for it will pay anyway because they don't take. They kind of value the additional thing you have around, like how easy integrated it is, how much they can just ping you and say, hey, help us fix this, or like all of these things are what they actually pay for. So I think a lot of the drawbacks, people tend to overestimate them. The main drawback I see is just the losing focus. Like it takes a lot of time to clean up a repository, to maintain it, to add like tests, to follow a bit the issue. You cannot follow the issue. For the first year, I was very bad at responding to, and that's fine. If your thing is cool, people won't mind. But it takes time. So is this time not better used for something else, right? So I think that's the main question.
Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Allie. I'm building Verde, which is an app that's like the security scorecard for your AI agents, helps you understand the risk of your AI security posture and what you're building. I've also spent the last year speaking on AI security and participating in the OWASP Agentic Security Initiative as one of the core contributors to the Agentic apps that just came out. I also run a podcast on AI security. I was really interested to hear your take on open source model security. There's so many different parts to that, whether that's like serialization attacks, backdoors that can be built in. And then Anthropic just recently released evidence and learnings about elicitation attacks, where they found that if you take data from a large language model and you feed it into a small model and you fine tune it, that model, even if it was trained to not be good at like chemical warfare, and you could actually use that benign data from the large language model to make it better at those requests, which I thought was like super interesting. And I just was really curious on your take on like, where does Hugging Face's responsibility lie in the security model to help users prevent that? Or is it completely on the user? Like I think with Claudebot, we've seen the founder was like, hey, like it's up to users to configure this correctly and assume all the risks. I just had that guy, Peter Steinberger, founder of Claudebot, on my podcast, Insecure Agents. So super interesting to get his take on that. My guess is you don't share that take. I know you partnered with Protect AI and Ian Swanson's tool, Model Scan, to help people understand the security risks of the models they were downloading from Hugging Face. What was the value of that partnership for you, and what users do you find care about security?
I mean, there is many aspects. Claudebot is fun because all the security, most people use it with closed source model, right? And the security issue is really there. So I think there's a lot of security that's actually not so much model related, but just how we integrate them, how we give them access to many things, and then actually plugging them in many vectors of attacks. So just, at least that's one thing I'm very worried about, and I try to work. And that's kind of independent of whether you close or open source. It's just about how you give it access to personal data. Yeah, and then I guess there is the more like maybe it was very popular, I think 2 years ago, worried that model might be dangerous themselves, like backdoors, people might bake in, and maybe models also decide, that's kind of existential risk, all of that. I think this is something that should be taken into account very seriously. I think as long as we have like a diversity of open source models, seems like a small problem to me. We have I think now 4 million models on Hugging Face. So will they all be poised? No, I don't think so. The model you're using change every few months. Like sometimes it was Quen, and then people are like, oh, but what if the Quen team is bad? Knowing there's just a cloud company, Alibaba. But then now there is like a GPT OSS, a lot of people are using. So just the diversity of choice, I think, reduce a lot the danger. And in a way, it's even maybe a little bit more worrying in terms of closed source model, because the number of actors is very small, so you have to trust them really well, right? If you only have choice between 3 right now, I mean 4, there is Grok, right? But if you have OpenAI, Anthropic, XAI, in the end, security is about trusting the company making this model to not build, put bad things in them, or to handle this for you, which is true for open source. You have to trust. And the main problem was that a lot of open source models were Chinese, so people are like, we don't trust the Chinese, so we don't trust their model. But if you're in China, they probably have the same, the opposite. Like we have to trust Anthropic and OpenAI, and these guys are from the US. So, but the thing with closed source model, you only have 3 choices. So you better have at least one in these 3 that you really trust enough to believe that they are doing the good things. Anthropic is maybe the most trustful at this time. But yeah, so I think there's a whole thing, and in the end, it's a little bit like blockchain. I feel like this is a whole like trust issue around. Yeah. And you could imagine maybe also put this model in a huge battery of tests to see all the backdoors and the thing. But I think the reality very likely of this, I don't have a research project, but it's just the surface of attack is just too large to be able to scan all the possibility of things you can put. And on the last thing, which is maybe more existential risk, which is this model can be dangerous in themselves, and should we actually be careful? I think at some point we should definitely have a series of measure, and there is already, and some of the teams, and I know we are working on that. We should subject all the models, closed source or open, to the same batteries of tests. My current feeling is that the current generation is still not really at the self-awareness, I'm a dangerous level, but yeah, who knows? So yeah, what we tried the thing we've done actively was around education. We tried to be very transparent. We tried to foster, we have a group called Emerald Society. We try to work with organizations that care about the impact of this model on society. Some of this is risk, some of this is discrimination. What does it mean if a model is only trained, for instance, in the US, and we use this in low resource languages, and then maybe there's a problem, there's a measure of bias in this model, when you ask like political bias on this model, where where does it stand? It's a huge field, I think, and security is part of it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's probably people at Hugging Face who are way more interested in that than me. I'm a little bit boring entrepreneur, just build stuff. But like Meg Mitchell, for instance, at Hugging Face, she's been super big. Like she founded the Google Brain ethics team. Sasha Luciani, they have been thinking about this question a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, because the trust problem is huge, because the onus is on the user then to pick which model, even though there's diversification, which is great.
I think it's trust. And then concentration of power is linked to that. I think it's hard to disentangle the two. Yeah, but yeah.
Cool,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Lucas. I'm one of the co-founders of Reflex. And as a side project yesterday, I decided to connect my Go-To from Unitree to Cloud Code to let it control. And it was pretty fun. But I had a lot of problems with ROS 2. So I decided to completely replace it with a library in Rust and Python that I made myself, and it works pretty well. Now I'm thinking, how do I open source it? What's my strategy to get this essentially to be the PyTorch for robotics, right? Because it's a Python library that compiles with a JIT compiler to like efficient kernels. So I think this could be useful for like a very easy get into the robotics industry.
Yeah, I mean, this will cover again a bit some of the things I said, but I would say first one is don't underestimate the thing you need to get this off the ground. So you will need, if you want to make it a very wide, widely applicable library, you'll need to build a lot of integration yourself. So I would list, if you think what is the minimal amount of integration that is sufficient for a user to think that this is the best library in the world to do this thing, and then you try to do this. So that's what I would do. I don't know exactly what it covers for you, which type of robots you want to, which part of ROS you want to rebuild, and all of that depends a bit.
Ground up.
What?
Ground up, completely.
All of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
It sucks.
Yeah. So that's a good challenge. A lot of people have tried that, but I think it's good to keep trying.
Hi, Thomas. I think it's a great segue for my question. So thanks for your talk. I'm a former contributor to ROS and a big fan of Hugging Face.
Sorry
I'm a big fan of Hugging Face too. So, and it's great to hear your thoughts briefly on ROS and talking about standards. And I guess on Twitter/X, I always see the ROS community and Hugging Face kind of going back and forth, a little bit of discussion or arguments. I was wondering if there's a history behind, that ROS.
No, and maybe I was joking, but that was probably a bit too harsh. I think ROS is fine, but I just think that there is probably, it was made at a time where the stack was not the same.
It's too bloated now, perhaps.
What?
It's too bloated, perhaps, now.
No, I think this is the okay part. But right now, people expect the stack to be very Pythonic, very Rust. I would say probably there is this type of basic that has come to emerge as the basics for all AI. And then the thing is, there is an impedance mismatch when you want to, and you go in Rust, and it's like more this C++ stack, and there's so. I think that's part of the thing that.
So it's more a pragmatic approach.
It's pragmatic, yeah. And the problem is, or at least for us, I think, is the good thing. But you have all this legacy that you've built, and you need to keep support, and you need to manage to find the way to make it evolve. Why backward compatibility, keeping you cannot just say okay, we scratch it all and we start. And so that's the tricky part. But then I think it's honestly amazing that it exists.
Do you think? I mean, I guess you guys are now owning almost the entire stack. Do you think Hugging Face
can build? So for instance, on our side, for instance, we want to integrate. So there is some integration with ROS. We have one contributor to ROS 2, the Zenodo. Is it Zenodo? No, I'm wrong.
Which one?
There's the.
You're talking about for Ricci ROS 2 integration, or?
I mean, Ricci is not really the. I mean, Ricci is mostly just like a camera and microphone. So it's like, is it? I feel like you could have a ROS too, but is it exactly what you need?
So do you think that Hugging Face can create an alternative, I guess, to ROS that is more direct down to the firmware?
So for instance, for low robots, which is maybe the closest thing, so we have an integration, we started with that, but then at some point we're like, okay, maybe we can also have direct some support for like The reason was that for Low Robot, we wanted to have this entry point in robotics, and we have these robotic arms called SO100. And the goal is that any software developer should almost be able to build and use SO100. And so installing ROS was the main problem for them. And so we were like, okay, maybe we're just going to support this motor directly, and we build our like, little thing for that. And so that started a bit like that, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, there is no any specific buff. It's mostly that I'm reflecting some like complaint of other people, yeah.
Hi, my name is Ashu. I'm building PillPilot, basically building AI agents for pharmacy back office operations. And to be honest, you answered a lot of my questions already, but I'm honestly just kind of curious, like as a founder who's building Hugging Face since like 2016, what is something that you miss about the early stages of building a startup that honestly just aren't the same at the scale that you're operating today?
In our own company, you mean, or when I compare building a startup in 2016 and building a startup in 20...
Just in general, like as a founder.
Oh, just, I mean, just the size of the company, I think. I mean, we're not so big, and we're 250, which, I mean, Anthropic or OpenAI are way, way larger, for instance. But I think I definitely miss I think there is a switch around like 30, 40 people. I think it changed, yeah, and it's hard, yeah. That's just the way it changed. And then, yeah, I mean, yeah. Then there's, yeah, no, I think that's the main thing. The size of the team is kind of, if you can keep under 30 for a long time, I think it's really cool. Yeah, it's really cool.
Thank you.
How do you make money, sir? You don't
make money. Yeah, we have two ways to make money. We have a big consulting partnership with very large, so Google is client, or Amazon, this type of, and the other is we have enterprise version of our hub. So that's the two, yeah.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thanks, everyone.